I'm Charles Battersby with Player Affinity, and this is Press XY, Transgender Issues in Gaming. And over the next hour, we're going to talk about many different issues. We're going to start off by talking about transgender characters, and there are a lot more transgender characters than you might realize. So we're just going to talk about the ones that have special significance to us or that have had special impact in the game industry. We're also going to talk about games that have a unique appeal towards transgender gamers, things that have had a strong impact on us as players. And we're also going to speak with some transgender game designers as well and go over issues about all of these factors. So we're using the term transgender as an umbrella term. We're going to cover characters who cross-dress for plot. We're also going to have characters that are pre- and post-op transsexual. So it's being used as an umbrella term today. And here is the rest of our panel.
Hi, I am Eric Patterson, also known as Shidoshi for any of you internet people. I am from Electronic Gaming Monthly, aka EGM. We are a magazine, website, iPad stuff. Thank you! If you read, thank you so much. And I also do a number of podcasts, including Warning, a huge podcast, which is a Japanese gaming-focused podcast. And yeah, I do a lot of this stuff, and I'm here because we had to have a certain number of redheads on the panel.
Hello. My name is Morgan McCormick. I am transirent.com, and I'm actually a crisis counselor at a rape crisis center, but I do little bits of video gaming things on the side. And this is one of them. I just did we were supposed to plug things that we did recently, yes? I just did a swimsuit photo shoot with lesbian news site Auto Straddle, so I'm Miss April if you'd like to look me And that's my cool recent thing.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Heineman. I was one of the founders of Interplay Productions. I was there from day one. I was responsible for games like Mind Shadow, Transcender, Pastimes in Town. A lot of technology was used in the original Bard's Tale, and I was the sole programmer of Bard's Tale 3, The Thief of Fate. Since then, I've done well over 100 titles, and today I'm going to be starting putting together a team to make another Bard's Tale-ish game. And because we're using old school people as well as old school technology, the game company is called Old School.
Hi, I'm Janelle Jaquays. My roots in gaming go back to the dinosaur days of pencil and paper role playing. I started by publishing a fanzine, which is, I guess, what would be the equivalent of a blog these days, for Dungeons and Dragons. From there, I heard there's a few fans of that game. From there, I went to work for a company called Judges Guild. I wrote some adventures called Dark Tower, Caverns of Thracia, that we're maybe 33 years later, are still in print. Some of them are actually considered the best adventures ever written. Hey, this is my biography. From there, I ended up going to Coleco, who, remember Cabbage Patch Kids? I didn't work on them. I did work on the ColecoVision. When the ColecoVision shut down, I was director of game design. I worked on all the entertainment titles, my team did. From there, I freelanced for a few years. Actually did work for Interplay during that time period. Becky's and my career have crossed back and forth numerous times. After that, I ended up working for TSR as an illustrator. I'm an artist and designer. I did cover paintings. From there, I jumped over back into video games. I worked for id Software, Quake 2, Quake 3. Left there. I was a level designer on these games.
I did the Mac ports.
From there, I went to Ensemble Studios, and I have credits in anything produced from 2002 to 2009. So I'm a playtester on Age of Mythology, but I worked on Age of Empires 3 as an artist. And on their expansion pack, the War Chiefs. And then finally, I did about the art pass, what makes the game the playable level for about half the levels in Halo Wars, the multiplayer levels in Halo Wars. And from there, when Microsoft shut us down, I moved on to, I work now for CCP North America, the people who do EVE Online, but I'm the lead level designer on the World of Darkness project.
Well, now I'm not exactly sure what to say. I feel somewhat daunted. I'm Chris Allen. I'm creative director of Obsidian Entertainment. Our last big title is Fallout New Vegas. And I don't know how many of you may have been responsible for me getting some very good news this morning through Kickstarter, but I can't wait to go back and start working on Wasteland 2. So if you actually... I actually worked at Interplay many years ago. I've been in the game industry for about 16 years, and I've worked on basically a shitload of RPGs. That's pretty much my bio.
RPG already, so.
Okay, and now that introductions are settled, we're going to talk chronologically about the first transgender video game character, and that is Birdo from the Mario. I guess Birdo is very pink and pretty, but she is actually a boy of her species of pink dinosaur thing.
Is that the official term there?
I think that is her official race.
I think that's the genus and the species.
And so Birdo is with us right at the dawn of the classic console ages. It's nice to see that transgender characters go back literally decades. And we started with a non-human character, but it's still great that there's a character who's specifically said to belong to one physical sex and have a cultural gender. And to explain the difference between physical sex and gender and basic transgender terminology, Morgan McCormick will give us a primer.
Hello. So, quickest thing, if you are just baffled by body genders and trans people in general just confuse you, this is great for you. So, there's a difference. Sex is the biology you're given at birth. Sexuality is your attraction to other people, and gender is how you identify across the big sociological spectrum that is male and female over here. Let's see here. Transgender umbrella covers a lot of things: cross-dresser, transgender, transsexual. Let's see here. Gender identity is typically the term that trans people usually evoke to describe themselves, and that usually just goes back to I feel this one way even though I was given this other body, and I wish to act this way socially alongside my gender identity. And gender expression, finally, is a term that came out a little bit before that, because transgender is only a word that we sort of accepted in the past like decade and a half or so. And gender expression is basically just wanting to wear the clothes you want to regardless of what gender it is they express. So for example, the clothing we're all wearing right now, I love this clothing, you're at PAX, you want to be seeing the clothing you love. Well, people who want their gender expression want to be in clothing they love too. And there's your reframe.
And one of the issues that Birdo raises is 20 years ago, it might have been very controversial if she had been a human character. So how does everyone feel? You said that being transgender has become more acceptable in the last decade or so, but Birdo has been around since the late 80s. Do you think it would have been unthinkable at the time to have a transgender video game character who is a human?
I think because it's like it was mentioned in the manual, if I remember correctly, that she was trans, and I feel like that's something you see a lot, and especially the trans community, is this big desire to do research beyond the game itself. Because obviously, there's no point when you run into Birdo and you run across Birdo, and Birdo says, "You're violating my gender boundaries."
I think it was also safe to say that because no one ever reads the manual, no one knows.
Well, I think what's really interesting is that for anybody who grew up during the 8-bit era, or anybody who knows anything about it, Nintendo was very strict about what you could and couldn't have in video games. I mean, you couldn't even have female characters as enemies in video games back then. But in the manual for Super Mario Bros. 2, it says, he thinks he is a girl, and he spits eggs from his mouth. He'd rather be called Birdette. Now, this coming from Nintendo of America is crazy at that point. And I don't know if they just didn't even realize it when they printed the manual or what, but in the very next version of the game that came out, that statement was completely gone.
Oh, and speaking of you couldn't have a female character as enemies, that brings us to one of my favorite transgender video game characters, Poison from Final Fight, who just recently, thank you, come on, Poison. And she just recently became an awesome playable character in Street Fighter Cross Tekken. And Eric.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to see a raise of hands real quick. Who here doesn't know that Poison is transgender? Okay, this is very, very interesting. So,
Those are the same people who didn't read the manual.
Do you know what panel you're in?
so Poison existed originally as a random enemy character in the game Final Fight from Capcom. Side-scrolling beat up. She was just one of numerous enemies. And her existence at that point was very, very meaningless. She was just a random character put in there because they needed more sprites to have as enemies. And 20 years later, she has become one of the most significant and most out there examples of transgender characters in video games. But the question comes up, is she transgender? Because the urban legend goes that she was originally female in Japan, but then Capcom said, wait a minute, people in the West, they don't want to beat up women, so what should we do? So their supposed solution was that, hey, if she used to be a man, then it's okay to hit her. So, yeah, right? No logic there at all. But that was the story that went out. But no matter what her origins are, the unfortunate part is her origins are still kind of clouded. Now, documents have come out that purport to be design documents for Final Fight, where on the bottom of the document it says new half. And new half is a Japanese term used to describe either post-op transsexuals or sometimes pre-op transgender people. So we don't know for sure 100% what Poison was meant to be originally. What we do know is by the time Final Fight hit America over 20 years ago, the character was transgender.
And as you can tell, that this complicated debate has been going on for a while. And it was actually because of this debate that I found out that trans characters even existed in video games. And you have to understand, when I was a kid looking for my escapism, trying to not be in the very bearded body that I had, you know, the idea that this medium that I love so much actually sort of condoned a trans character, even in this bizarre, attenuated, bizarre way, was actually what led me to go into more research. Because I think that's why it's important that like mediums, you know, should take out this cause of trying to represent trans people, because it just spreads the word out. And if Poison didn't exist, it might have been that much longer before I found a word for who I was. So go Poison.
And another character whose gender was very ambiguous in her game is Kaine from the very quirky cult title Nier.
And silence, a little too quirky, a little too cold.
Alright, so this is a quirky title that everybody should play just for its quirkiness, but also, if you play through the entire story of the game, you would think that Kaine is just a rough and tumble, kind of tomboyish girl. But when you play the game through a second time with the New Game Plus mode, there's new text and story added in, which explain that she is intersexual. And you would only know this if you had successfully beaten the game and started up a new one. And she's one of my favorite characters. She's not only really pretty, but she's also really tough.
And to do a redux of our terminology a minute before, intersex is not under the transgender umbrella. It's the PC word for what used to be called hermaphroditic or hermaphroditism. It's where you're born with, what's the shortest version? It's sort of conflicting biological sex. And her story is really interesting because you don't find out about it until, once again, you do some extra work beyond the game. That's one of the new game pluses, right?
Yes. And Kaine, she's also very heroic and very tragic too. And the text that explains her backstory in childhood, she's persecuted by the other children in her small village and ends up being run out of town to live in the wilderness. So it's a very sad story, and I think it would touch a lot of transgender gamers reflecting their own childhood.
And there's an unfortunate amount of rejection from people's families. Folks, when you don't have a families and your kid pops out and goes, trans! So you give them a big hug and you deal with it.
And spoiler alert, another character who you might not know is transgender until you beat the game is Erica.
I'm going to ask again, who here didn't know Erica from Catholic transgender? Okay, so again, this is...
Different ending, true love is ending.
Yes. So now what is interesting about Erica is she kind of gives us a look at Japan's overall mentality about transgender characters and people. Erica exists in the world of Catherine, and she exists in this location with all the main characters, and they treat her as an equal, but at the same time, they do kind of make comments and suggestions at her about her not being feminine enough or not being a good woman or things like that. And if you are careful in playing the game, you could pick up on these things, but if you aren't really looking for those, you might not see them. And it's, you know, there's been discussion about whether or not Erica is a good transgender character. And on some points she's not, because she is, like many of the characters we were talking about, or the character positions in video gaming, she is sometimes used as a, well, she's okay, but. There's always this sort of little but there. But at the same time, when you're playing this game, Catherine, none of the main characters are really sparkling examples of, you know. I mean, all the men in this game, too, are kind of total horn dogs, you know, and they're all talking about cheating or doing this or doing that or whatever. So you have to look at it in the whole entire scheme of the game and how those characters are presented.
And I think Erica is sort of a result of what I've sort of called the Star Trek theorem of LGBT. Since we've seen the Star Trek TV show, you'll know that they've done a lot of deserved stick for not doing the best representations of the LGBT spectrum. But at the same time, though all their LGBT character stories end very tragically, I feel like in a way they were sort of articulating the fact that back then, especially when the TV show was running, people weren't allowed to openly talk about things like being gay. Their stories ended tragically because unfortunately that's how a lot of stories were ending back then. And so Erica kind of reminds me of people that I know who've suddenly transitioned in a group of friends but not said anything about it, and everyone just sort of doesn't know what's going on because it's not accepted as a good thing to talk about it, evidenced by the fact that nobody talks about it in the game.
Oh, and no matter what you do in the game, your romantic choices always end up being between Catherine with a K or Catherine with a C, and you can't successfully romance Erica. So I'm hoping Atlas's next game is going to be a game where you can choose between Erica with a C or Erica with a K. And now, speaking of some not so great transgender depictions, we have Alfred Ashford from the Resident Evil games. Alfred is the classic Norman Bates split personality psycho killer. There is an Alexia Ashford, but he developed a split personality and thinks that he's both Alfred and Alexia. So he's also something of a negative depiction because when he's dressed as Alfred, he's a very prissy, sissy male character.
And I think not only that, but you have a character who's like, wow, is he like into his sister kind of? Or is it too much? So I mean, it was kind of one of those characters who like, they were just like heaping on this is why we want you to think this character's a freak kind of things, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's a shame people think that Norman Bates is sort of an understandable, like, sort of transgender mold, because I haven't killed anyone in at least 3 weeks.
And furthering the Norman Bates crazy murderous transvestite stereotype is another quirky game. This is a tremendous cult game. It's based strongly on Twin Peaks. And Aaron?
Yeah, so here's the thing. So when you play Deadly Premonition, you kind of get this idea that Thomas is the crazy crossdresser, right? You know, he falls in love with the main villain, and he's going along, and you think, hey, this is a nice guy, and all of a sudden, boom, here he is in a dress wanting to kill you. But here's the interesting part about Thomas versus Alfred. The game itself, now, it puts Thomas as a villain at a certain point, but for all the rest of the game, Thomas is this very positive character. And the main character of Agent York, or Zach, however you want to look at him at a certain point, he never once makes any sort of derogatory comment about Thomas. And we're seeing the whole world of Deadly Premonition through Agent York. And even at the very end of the game, after Thomas has become this murderous character and he's trying to kill the main female character and then he gets killed himself, Agent York still sees Thomas not only as a positive character, but he sees Thomas as one of the game's main female characters at the very end of the game. And I think that's a very interesting distinction, is that the main character, when all the female characters from the game are lined up at the very end, there's Thomas. And while I guess some people will say, well, he looks a little crazy because he's just a guy standing there in a dress, he is seen as one of the female characters, and that's how Agent York sees him. So that's how we as players see him. So it's a very interesting difference between those two games, I think.
That's true. Anybody else? Thomas or Norman Bates?
Well, just in general, in entertainment, transgender people generally, it's an excuse to say, well, here's a bad person. You know, particularly, you know, in my formative years, the late 60s, the 70s, generally if you found a cross-dresser, you knew you had a villain.
Yeah, kind of like Rainey Mosselmeyer from Grand Theft Auto, Liberty City Stories and Vice City Stories. So like, she's not necessarily any more evil than anyone else in Grand Theft Auto. Not like that same but, you know, she does, you know, she seems to get her sort of post-op surgery just for, you know, the kick of it. But, you know, she is sort of a helper character here, and, you know, it's better. So I guess that project was right. It does get better.
And speaking of Grand Theft Auto, the psycho killer, that's the actual name of the character, who's stalking the band Love Fist, turns out to be dressed up in a Britney Spears outfit. And you instantaneously know you should murder this character as soon as you see it. But on a much more positive depiction of transgender people, we have one of my favorites as well, Bridget. And so Bridget is a playable character in a fighting game. She beats people up with her teddy bear. But she's a great character to play. She's just as tough as some of the other characters in the Guilty Gear games. And she's generally depicted as a positive role model character.
I think she's one of the more good. Yeah, that was a great sentence, everybody. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I think she's one of the better cross-dresser interpretations because, I mean, cross-dressers, people just sort of dress up, for their own reasons. And it is part of Bridget's identity to dress up this way because of Bridget's complicated backstory. And never really says anything disparaging over it. I mean, it's still sort of used as a kind of trickster capacity. Like, you thought I was a girl, do you want me now? Thing that it happens sometimes. But still, she's a lot of fun and kind of adorbs.
Well, so when you say connects to something I want to bring up, and Bridget is not necessarily responsible, but the catalyst for two very infamous internet memes that are out there. The first, of course, is everybody's gay for Bridget, which may or may not be true. The second, of course, is it's a trap, right? So let me ask real quick. How many of you out there know the meaning behind the internet slang trap? Okay. Second question. How many of you, this is interesting crowd, how many of you have ever used the word trap to refer to somebody either living or virtual? Not very many.
Honestly.
Okay, now one last question before we discuss this. How many of you know that the word trap is offensive? So, this is one word that we really want to talk about in this panel, is trap. And why is trap offensive? It gets thrown around all the time on the internet. Oh, he's a trap, she's a trap, oh, I fell for this trap, look out, there's going to be traps everywhere, you know, and whatever. But the problem and I know some people have also had weighed on this, but the problem with using the word trap to refer to anybody who is transgender is the meaning of the word trap as it's used currently means somebody who is doing something to confuse or otherwise trick somebody else into thinking that they are one gender when they're actually other. Now the problem with using this word to refer to anybody who's transgender is the fact that this is basically saying to them, you are transgender specifically because you want to trick somebody else. And it totally takes away any knowledge, understanding, or acknowledgement of that person's internal feelings, you know, their hopes, their dreams, their desires, why they are who they are, you know, all of that is removed and just saying you are basically nothing more than a con artist. Right?
Yeah, and for those who may remember, actually, that was that was actually one of the previous names of the panel. Was It's a Trap ? Transgender issues in gaming, which we got stick from people from, which at the time I think, and anyone just reach across and slap my pretty little red head if I'm speaking in turn here. They're all within arm's reach, but y'all can vote for which one you want to slap. But I kind of thought that was like a kind of the way that the feminist movement took that B word, since we have now found out that we're PG-13. I'm glad you warned me of that before. But it's still got so much negative stick to it, and honestly, transgenderism is full of all this lexicon, and still people are taking time to decide if we want to take ownership of this word or not. So I understand now, and actually thank you everybody in the community who wanted to talk with us about that, because I know a few years ago, anything that said it was transgender, people would just be too unnerved to get in touch with them and talk with them about what it is they want, and I've been so throughout the last few years have changed so much. Anyone else want to weigh in on that word? Full of electricity and landlines and barbed wire and unfortunate notes.
Just I would say, you know what? Don't use the word. In a bigger sense, understand the meaning of words. And understand what it will mean to somebody when you use a word to refer to them, you know? And if you don't know, ask. And that's one of the big things about this whole conversation of the transgender topic is, if you don't know, you know what? Ask. Asking is a lot better than assuming and being wrong. So.
In fact, ask if you can ask, if that's what you want. Because you'll find out that if you have questions about things that might be personal, ask if you can ask them. If someone's uncomfortable telling you, they'll tell you that.
All right, and now that we've done the serious talk, we're going to talk about the last of the characters we'll be discussing today.
Just very, very quickly, is Naoto. So Naoto is a shining example of a female-to-male character out there in video gaming. Is in the Persona series, right? Yeah. Except not. Naoto is not female-to-male. A lot of us think she is, but she's not, because if you play through Persona and get to the very ending of the game, she acknowledges to herself, well, this is, again, this is maybe a topic of conversation, but in the end of the game, she admits to herself the fact that her desire is not to be male. Her desire is to be taken seriously. So, is she female to male? Is she not? Is she transgender? Is she just a cross-dresser? What is Naoto? It's a very complicated situation, and unfortunately, before you kill me here, and I say that, Atlas is a great company and produces a lot of wonderful characters with depth through the whole Shin Megami Tensei series, but sometimes they don't have the backbone to say what they really want to say. And we look at a character Kanji, also from Persona 4, right? Kanji's gay, except they won't say it, and they always say it. Just like Capcom's Poison, well, it's up to the player to decide. You know, that's part of the problem with gaming, is we need more forcefulness to say, you know what? Damn it, Kanji's gay, Naoto's female to male, and if you don't like it, tough. But we don't get that confirmation, and especially with Naoto, there's a big question around it.
Yeah, I think at the end they were, I don't know if we want to go back to the whole Star Trek theorem, I think they were going with the fact that these are all, at the end of the day, regardless of who the characters are in Persona, they're still screwed up kids in school. And I don't think I know a transgender person who hasn't gone through at some point, like, changing the way that they are, or staying in the gender that they don't want to stay in because they want someone else to love them. So that's just my only take on that.
Oh, but there are quite a few games that let the player choose whether or not they want to play a cross-dresser. And one of those that uses this concept for humor is Dead Rising. So the character, Frank West, isn't specifically scripted as being a cross-dresser, but he gets to run around a huge shopping complex and can wear any piece of clothing that the player wants to put him in. So it's up to you to choose what Frank West's gender identity is.
Including kids' clothes.
Now that's just weird.
And there's also a couple of other games that you can deliberately cross-dress your character, like the Fable series.
And what's interesting about Fable is, you know what is really cool about Fable is that it doesn't make a big deal out of things. You know, like cross-dressing, same-sex marriage, same-sex adoption. You know, you want to go after this character instead of this character. It's not a big deal. And that's what's so interesting, like the whole Mass Effect 3 thing, right? People are like, we gotta burn EA down because there's the games in this game, you know? But it's been Fable for a long time, right? Like did people just not notice? You know, but the thing is, Fable, like, it's not a big deal. It's like, okay, it's part of the game, but there's so much other things going on. It's like, whatever, you just do what you want, nobody cares. You know, so it's interesting perspective of how Fable can do things and Mass Effect 3 can't, and yeah.
I don't think people think of it as a gay thing, I think of it as a Peter Molyneux thing.
And another thing that BioWare does with just about every game they do is they let you choose the gender of your character, even in older franchises like Knights of the Old Republic, where you can build your fantasy character however you like.
Chris, want to chime in on that?
Sorry, I did work on the sequel to that. Sorry, I blocked that out of my memory. I'm so kidding. So, just to clarify, very first, Knights of the Republic, very, very fine title done by BioWare, so I don't want to step on any toes here. The sequel was developed by Obsidian, and I really wish we'd had more time, and if you played it and got to the end, you can blame me after the show. I take full responsibility. Thanks, Mom. I told you not to come to this panel.
We can praise you for the other 79 hours of the game. That was terrific.
Well, thank you very much. You're very kind. But yeah, we feel that allowing the player, I mean, the core essence of a role-playing game is we want you to be able to play the type of character that you want to play. So we try and make sure that we get those gender choices in our games. And if we don't have any resistance from the publisher, which wasn't the case with LucasArts, and we don't have any resistance in terms of the actual code and engine technology, we're all in favor of that. And when I say the code and engine technology, sometimes we go so far with the gender choices in the game that actually, if you actually get a specific quest because of your gender, the ability to actually reverse that gender halfway through the quest would cause the programmers and scripters, God knows how much just exploded heads trying to fix the problem that would resolve. So sometimes it's a technical limitation, other times there's some pressure from the publisher and how those things work out.
Talking about gender choices, when I took over the project for Bard's Tale to do Bard's Tale 3, Thief and Fate, I had a huge argument with people over at Interplay because I wanted to introduce the ability for you to have a female character. Because Bard's Tale 1 and 2, you only could have male characters because I was told that only men would want to play these games. And so once I forced it through and got that out on Bard's Tale 3, a lot of people were saying, finally!
Oh, and another one of Chris's games is a little project called Fallout New Vegas. This is one of my favorite play dress-up games. ladies, because every item of clothing that you come across has a male and female version. The male springtime outfit is just a pair of slacks, but if you're a woman and you put that on, you have a pretty pink dress. And it's full of things like that.
Yeah, again, the Fallout series, we try to make sure that there's a lot of gender choices in Fallout as well. A lot of the scripting difficulties that we have actually comes out in Fallout as well. Also, I think one thing that going as far back as Fallout 1 sort of drove home is the entire concept of gender actually ends up being a very, very major plot point in Fallout 1. If you guys happen to get a chance to play that title all the way through, you'll see what I'm talking about. And I believe that Good Old Games has it for free this weekend, so if you actually want to download it and check it out, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Woo. Oh, and actually, if you play female in New Vegas, you have the option for a quick path to seduce and murder one of the main villains.
Yeah, our creative lead, John Gonzalez, kind of got really excited about that. And he's in the office and he's sitting there telling me about it. And I'm like, you know, John, you're getting a little hot and bothered here. You want to slow down a little bit.
And if you don't have any other reasons to play Fallout New Vegas, you get to be shot in the face by Matthew Perry.
And now there are a lot of games that do let you build your own kind of fantasy character, whoever you want to be, and of course choose gender. One of my favorites for that is the Mass Effect series.
So, I think what's really interesting about Mass Effect, and if you see the graphic I put together for this, it's got a cross-section of male and female Shepard. And why I wanted to do that was because in Mass Effect, truly, like, when you come into it, no matter which path you pick, you feel equal to the other path. Like, you never feel like, I've made a mistake being a female character, I've made a mistake, you know, or I'm being punished for being a female Shepard. And you never get like, you know, babies or sweethearts or anything, you know, like the entire game gives her an equal footing with male Shepard. And why I think this game is important to this conversation is the fact that, you know, games give an outlet to people who are exploring, like, who am I and who do I want to be. And a lot of games have female choices where you've got, you know, the little chainmail bikini or something, you know, or the female, well, she's faster, but she's got less health and she's weaker, you know. Whereas Mass Effect 3, you truly have an equal choice there, and you can choose whichever one you want and explore this vast and interesting world as that character and with those interactions.
And that's a factor that we used to find in older MMOs. There you could choose gender and it would have very little significance on the plot at all, but you had tremendous customization options. And one of my favorite MMOs for the high levels of customization is City of Heroes. But this one, it has vast selection of clothing. You can even choose body sliders that will adjust your bust, waist, and hip ratio.
Well, I would tend to play that almost exclusively as female characters, whether they were heroes or in the City of Villains, any kind of monstrous female villain.
Yep. So the final thing we're talking about today is something called Dark Souls. Any fans? Come on, Dark Souls. That's the end of last year. So what's really interesting, and you may have, for the others of you who played this, may have completely missed this. The Dark Souls is a game where you can make your own character and you have character choices, but one of those choices is gender slider. So you pick male or female, right? Like I want a male, female, or a female character. You go in, and all of a sudden you see this thing called like hormones. What? And so after you pick your base sex, male or female, you can then actually toggle the hormone level to change the kind of like look and appearance of your character to be more masculine or feminine. And this is a very, very interesting choice, and not very many games have this. So it's not through that initial picking of which sex your character is going to be. You pick that initial sex, and then you can have like a very, very pretty guy, or you can have a super duper butch female character. You know, and it's nice. It's awesome to have that really wide selection of choice there.
We're running a little short on time. We want to do some question and answers. Are there people that want to do questions? All All right, we're just going to take a couple of minutes to round up a couple of issues, and then we'll launch into the Q&A. Maggie, can you tell us a little about your personal experiences as a transgender designer?
Well, really the only thing about being transsexual in this industry is the one where just the fear of being transsexual. There have been in past incidences where certain friends of mine, one Danny Bunton, who when she came out was totally ostracized from her family and eventually faded in obscurity. And only after her death was her contributions were recognized. Another one was of the Kitchen Brothers, the Atari 2600 fame. One of them was transsexual, and when she came out, she was ostracized from her family and pretty much ran out of the game business. So when I was dealing with my issues, and I've been dealing it since birth, I one day realized that if I didn't do something about this, that if I didn't take the steps necessary to cure myself, I would either kill myself or have a complete and utter nervous breakdown. But upon realizing that I needed to apply the cure, I came to the conclusion that the moment I came out, I was ready to lose everything. My family, my career, just so I could be authentic. When I made the announcement at Electronic Arts in 2004 that I was transsexual, things have changed. They embraced me. They came to congratulate me. I had many of the senior executives of Electronic Arts take me out to dinner and personally congratulate me on my bravery, which really wasn't bravery at all. It was just bravery at all. It was just me surviving. And since then, I have thrived and my career has skyrocketed, and I have had tours of duty at several major companies, and my phone's always ringing for people wanting me to do work for them. And this is totally opposite from what I've seen from my contemporaries in the 80s and 90s. And I just am very, very thankful that things have changed for the better, such as that. One more statement is that because I chose to live openly, there's a Wikipedia article somebody put up and I didn't bother asking to take it down. Anybody who types in my name, you know within 5 seconds I'm transsexual. I've had numerous others in the game industry come out to me. Some, like Janelle, are public. There's at least a dozen that I know who talk to me on a regular basis who are not. And if there's any of you here who are struggling, I will be a sympathetic voice if you wish to reach out.
I'm not certain that I can follow that. I do know that since my earliest days in role-playing, we all deal with this situation in our lives. Some need to transition a lot sooner. Others, we try to hide it. There's a couple of paths we do that. One is the macho route. That's where you go into the military, you become a police officer, or a fireman, or some kind of dangerous job. Because obviously if you do something manly and macho enough, and I'm referring to the guy side, female to male take a different approach. You do something macho, obviously you can cure yourself. Well, that doesn't work. The other side, I guess we'll call the nerd path. You get involved in games, and particularly in technology. If you do just kind of a random sampling of a lot of trans people, you will discover they work in IT. Not necessarily games, but the number of programmers, game developers, just people working with computers in general, you find out that, wow, there's a lot of us. So I hid this for 54 years of my life. Stuff cropped up in my games. If you really look at some of my earliest things I wrote back in my 20s, there's hints. It's in there. But a lot of it being commercial product, I couldn't. I even went so far in the 80s when I wrote some role-playing projects to write some games that actually attacked transgender, LGBT people. They were negative, and that was the way I was trying to compensate. But I dealt with this. What I ended up doing was waiting until my family was past the point where they needed me to survive. My children were growing up, they were out of school. I'm working for a company that has a gender expression policy. There are other trans people working for the company I work for. And at that point, I just knew it was right. And I made plans. I didn't just come out. I planned for 8 months. And then last December, I left the world now. And I have lived as Janelle since. It has been the one thing, and we talk about losing family, we talk about how important it is, families breaking up. I had 2 people in my life who I knew I could lose. They were my kids. My kids are both adults. And I made a point of talking to both of them separately, coming out to them in person. And separately, they both came to me and said it doesn't matter. And that's really what we want as transgender people, for you to relate to us, is just to tell us, it doesn't matter.
Unfortunately, our hour is almost through. We have about 5 minutes for people who would like to ask questions. So please line up in the center aisle. There's a microphone right there.
And should we say the fact that after the panel's over, if you still have other questions you don't have time for, I think we're going to be around, right?
Yes.
We will definitely be around both in here and outside the theater.
Okay.
You first.
Hey, my name is Neville. It's supposed to be thank you for your panel. And I know it sort of shouldn't matter. It sort of seems kind of big that you have at least the option to choose a female character in a lot of newer games like Mass Effect, where you can flip their game around, the game cover around, you can put the female character in the front. So I'm just curious, sort of, do you think that there should be the option to be a transgender character, like male, female, and other? Something like that? Or when you play as a character, what type of gender do you choose? You know, if that's you or something that's you? I'm just curious.
I think I'm very proud to be a trans person, so I would definitely like it if there were positive trans characters, and definitely that as an option, because well, the intent of transitioning in a lot of ways is, existing on the part of the gender spectrum that you want to. I also take a lot of pride in being part of the trans community, and I would like if there was a positive character or just a positive way of portraying the for them. I think I would go for this as well.
I think part of the interesting thing about that question we have is in the argument of Poison, whether or not she's transgender, the side who says she isn't has been saying, well, it doesn't matter if she's trans, so what? She's a fighting game character, but it does matter because, like as Morgan said, it's representation. It's having that knowledge that even if you select after being transgender and you can't really see a difference in your characters, you're not gonna run around naked or anything. So, even if it's difference, if you know the fact of what your character is and how that connection is, I think that's a great deal.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of symbolic power that people totally underestimate because developers will say, oh, our character wasn't supposed to be represented in the trans community, but I don't think you get to choose what characters you're using up as role models. That just sort of happens, so you might as well strive to do well and reach out to your community and ask for help.
Yeah, Poison has become my favorite character in the new Street Fighter game. And the next question, please.
Hi, I'm Marma. Thanks for the panel. That's great. I have a question. I forget your name on the end.
I'm Chris.
Great. I know you mentioned something about like you had some backlash from publishers or whatever about something gender stuff you put in games. Like, what if maybe you and everybody else as developers or writers or whatever, like if you try to say let's include like gender options in a game or like something like that, what has been the type of backlash from publishers and what are their reasons for not wanting that in a game?
So part of our responsibility as designers is you uphold the franchise that you work for. And as a result, in some instances, the shareholder, the keepers of that franchise have very specific views about how they want to portray it. The biggest problem that comes to mind recently is we were doing a game called Mask the Betrayer for Neverwinter Nights 2, and one of the characters is a companion named Gan, and Gan is a hag spawn. He can read dreams. He doesn't really care what you look like. He can just fall in love with your personality. And we tried to portray that as, here's how we'd like to do the relationship in the game. We're going to present it in a very mature format. But overall, they just came back to us and said, you know what, we would just prefer that there's no confusion there and just don't allow that as an option, which was pretty disappointing to us. So we've generally found the best way to go about it is that we would much rather just pursue role-playing games outside of franchises and make franchises of our own that are more accepting of those elements. And I think that's kind of the point of a role-playing game. You should be able to play the kind of character that you want to without someone else dictating it from above.
I wore my Mule t-shirt today in honor of Danny. I was wondering if you think she's getting more of her due today and whether she's inspired any of you. I heard your story, Rebecca, but if anybody else in the younger generation knows of her work, she made some very influential games. Technology that she used was important.
After the Kotaku article that they did that got a bit of stick for not coming out so well, and they ended, and then the whole process of the fact that the article had not turned out very sympathetic got a lot of attention. And now, if you type in, I look at these things all the time. If you type in transgender video games in Google, it's the second result every single time for that Kotaku article. And Auntie Pixel and several other people wrote some good articles about the problems with the Kotaku article. And honestly, them getting it wrong did a lot more favors for the community than anything else because it got the issue out there, and you've seen even more trans-oriented articles because of that article, because of the problems it brought up. So she's definitely, I hope, getting something close to the due that she's deserved.
Hello. Thank you for your great panel. It's amazing. I have a question about sort of less trans, more gender issue, but there's a new game coming out I just heard about that sort of rewards female players for playing female characters. And I had a very strong visceral reaction to this, and I was wondering what your thoughts on this was.
I don't know enough about the game, but I did hear that, and it was kind of like, what? That kind of, I don't like the idea, and I'm not exactly certain why they're doing it, but it's the thing about games is that they're an escape for people, and whatever that escape you need to be, maybe just you're bored and you want something to play, but if you need to be somebody else because your real life is not, conducive to a good experience, you should be able to have that choice. And it's really weird to say, well, if you're female, you should play a female character, and we're going to reward you for that. It just feels like a really confusing message.
Squeaky.
I'm sorry, I actually have a question for you. I'm not familiar with the game that you're speaking about.
I think it's called Prime Worlds. It's sort of
okay.
Dota kind of game. I just found out about it today.
And players are going to get stat bonuses or something in game if you play the gender or sex that you are in real life.
Yeah, to the point where you can't have a top level team if you don't have a female character or a female player. It
connects your Facebook account. Yeah, so it knows via Facebook what you really are.
It's to get more female.
Well, playing the game should be the reward for playing the game.
panel. I have a very slightly specific house question that I've come up a few times. Let's say you're playing D&D 3.5 and you have a character that's rolling a disguise check for a disguise outside their original gender basis. What if any kind of gender penalty or disguise penalty would you put on that disguise check? Given you don't have disguise kit.
You lost me at 3.5. No, my D&D experience came in a white box, and then had a D&D in front of it for a number of years. So I'm going to punt here. I actually quit playing Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games when I actually started doing it for work, and it wasn't fun anymore.
It's a game, it's real fun.
If I could interject, I did play a male dark elf character who cross-dressed as a female to survive the matriarchal dark elf society. Naturally. And we had a 20% penalty to it, which was -4 under the second edition rules.
Okay, Bert, thank you.
Comment in regards to the Dark Souls one of the things, if my voice sounds stupid. Anyway, what happened in the game Saints Row 2, well, not a shining example of what you should do in real life. There's a gender slider, and I thought that was sort of similar to the Dark Souls.
Yeah, that was actually something that we were talking about bringing out, but unfortunately, due to time issue, we didn't have a chance to do everything. But yeah, the Saints Row series has been very interesting, and gender roles allows you to play.
Yes, we've actually just had time called, so if anyone has any more questions, we'll be outside the theater, and we'll also be lurking around here for a few minutes. If anyone has any last-minute statements, just take it for a second.
Real quick, it was coming to a panel like this several years ago, just to ride on PAX coattails for a moment, that helped me deal with being trans, because there's a person there who said, you can contact me whenever you need to if you're ready to talk. I needed that email address 18 months later, and so if you want to go to my website and find my inbox whenever you need it, as long as it is operating, please feel free to send me an email. People should have people to talk to.
Is there any last-minute statement anyone wants to make?
Well, if any of you are transsexual and you want to know that you should check your HR department to see if there is a policy for transsexuals or non-discrimination. If there isn't one, ask HR to put one in.